The neon lights of Miami Beach reflected off the rain-slicked streets as Detective Maria Alvarez pulled up to the luxury apartment complex on Ocean Drive. It was 3:47 a.m. on a humid September morning, and something about the call had felt wrong from the moment dispatch radioed it in. A wellness check gone bad. A young woman unresponsive. The building's concierge had been unable to reach tenant Isabella Martinez for 3 days, and the smell seeping from under her door had prompted the 911 call. Maria had worked homicide for 12 years in Miami-Dade County. She'd seen drug deals gone wrong, gang violence, crimes of passion fueled by jealousy and betrayal. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to uncover. A murder orchestrated by algorithms, documented by artificial intelligence, and committed by someone whose entire existence was a performance for an audience of millions. Isabella Martinez was 22 years old, a graduate student at the University of Miami studying marine biology. Her apartment was modest but cheerful, filled with posters of coral reefs and photographs of sea turtles. Friends described her as radiant, the kind of person who volunteered at ocean cleanup events every weekend and dreamed of saving the world's dying reefs. She had moved to Miami from a small town in Central Florida, drawn by the proximity to the ocean she loved so deeply. When the apartment door was finally breached, the scene appeared straightforward. Isabella lay peacefully on her bed, dressed in pajamas, as if she had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no visible wounds. The medical examiner's initial assessment suggested a possible drug overdose or natural causes, perhaps an undiagnosed heart condition. But Detective Alvarez had learned to trust her instincts, and every fiber of her being was screaming that this was murder. The first responders had found Isabella's phone on the nightstand, still plugged in and charging. The screen was lit with dozens of unopened messages and missed calls from worried friends. But it was the most recent notification that caught Maria's attention. A tagged Instagram post from someone named @VenusViolet_official. The post was a tearful video tribute to my beautiful bestie Isabella, uploaded just hours after the estimated time of death. The timing felt calculated. The grief felt performed. Venus Violet was Miami's newest social media sensation, a 23-year-old influencer who had exploded onto TikTok 6 months earlier with a viral dance video. She now commanded 2.4 million followers across platforms. Her content a carefully curated mix of fashion hauls, luxury lifestyle posts, and sponsored advertisements. Her real name was Victoria Vance, and according to Isabella's text messages, she lived in the same apartment building, just 2 floors below. Detective Alvarez pulled up Victoria's social media profiles on her phone as she stood in Isabella's bedroom. The contrast was striking. While Isabella's modest Instagram showed genuine moments of joy at the beach and with rescued animals, Victoria's feed was a glossy magazine spread brought to life. Every image was perfectly lit, every caption engineered for maximum engagement. But Maria noticed something else. Isabella appeared frequently in Victoria's earlier posts, always positioned as a supportive friend holding the camera or laughing in the background. In recent months, however, Isabella had vanished from the feed entirely, replaced by paid sponsorships and luxury brand collaborations. The investigation began in earnest at dawn. Maria's partner, Detective Carlos Rodriguez, arrived with the Crime Scene Investigation Unit. Carlos was a veteran with 25 years on the force, a methodical investigator who believed in evidence over intuition. Together, they made an effective team. Maria's instincts balanced by Carlos's systematic approach. The CSI team processed Isabella's apartment with meticulous care. They found no suicide note, no pill bottles, no drug paraphernalia. Isabella's laptop revealed a young woman focused on her graduate research, her browser history filled with scientific journals and conservation websites. Her bank account showed modest student loan payments and occasional small donations to environmental charities. There was no evidence of depression, no digital footprint suggesting she was anything other than a happy, ambitious young woman with her whole life ahead of her. But in the kitchen, a forensic technician discovered something unusual. On the counter next to Isabella's coffee maker sat a smart speaker, one of those voice-activated devices that had become ubiquitous in modern homes. The small black cylinder appeared innocuous, but Maria knew these devices were always listening, always waiting for their wake word. She made a note to subpoena the audio logs from the manufacturer. The breakthrough, however, would come from an unexpected source: artificial intelligence. Detective Alvarez knocked on Victoria Vance's door at 9 a.m. The apartment that answered the knock was a stark contrast to Isabella's simple living space. Victoria's home looked like a professional photography studio. Ring lights stood in every corner, backdrops were stacked against one wall, and expensive camera equipment covered every available surface. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers arranged artfully in crystal vases. Victoria herself answered the door in full makeup despite the early hour, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. She wore designer loungewear that probably cost more than Maria's monthly salary. When informed of Isabella's death, Victoria's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She burst into tears, her hands flying to her face, her body crumpling against the doorframe. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and Maria noted that despite the theatrical sobbing, not a single tear actually fell. "Oh my God," Victoria gasped between sobs. "Not Izzy. Not my best friend. She was like a sister to me. I just saw her a few days ago. She seemed fine. This can't be happening." Maria asked if they could come inside to ask a few questions. Victoria hesitated for just a fraction of a second, her eyes darting back into her apartment, before nodding and stepping aside. As they entered, Carlos immediately noticed the multiple video cameras mounted on tripods, all pointing toward a carefully arranged sitting area. This was Victoria's stage, the place where Venus Violet came to life. The interview began with standard questions. When had Victoria last seen Isabella? How had she seemed? Did she have any enemies or problems? Victoria's answers were smooth and rehearsed, painting a picture of a troubled friend who had been struggling with the pressures of graduate school. She mentioned offhandedly that Isabella had seemed a little depressed lately and had been talking about how hard everything was. It was a subtle character assassination, laying groundwork for a narrative of suicide. But Maria noticed the inconsistencies. Victoria claimed she'd been home alone editing videos on the night Isabella died, yet she couldn't provide specific details about which videos or when she'd posted them. She said she and Isabella had grown apart naturally, but the text messages Maria had reviewed showed Isabella reaching out repeatedly while Victoria's responses grew shorter and colder. Most tellingly, when asked about the tribute post she'd made, Victoria's grief seemed to evaporate for a moment, replaced by something that looked almost like pride. "I just wanted to honor her," Victoria said, her voice dropping the tremor of tears. "My followers deserve to know what happened." Carlos asked if they could take a look at her electronics as part of the routine investigation. Victoria's lawyer instinct kicked in. "Do you have a warrant?" she asked sweetly, her tears suddenly dried. They didn't. Not yet. But Maria knew they would soon. As they left Victoria's apartment, Maria turned back for one last look. Through the open door, she saw Victoria already back on her phone, the mask of grief completely gone, replaced by the focused expression of someone checking their engagement metrics. The performance was over the moment she thought the audience had left. Back at headquarters, Mariah assembled her team. The medical examiner had completed the autopsy, and the results were troubling. Isabella had died from respiratory failure, but the toxicology screen had come back clean for all standard drugs and poisons. Whatever had killed her wasn't in their database. The ME noted some unusual markers in her blood chemistry, but couldn't identify the specific compound without more specialized testing. It was Detective Rodriguez who suggested they bring in Dr. Jasmine Chen, a forensic AI specialist who had recently joined the department as a consultant. Dr. Chen was a computer scientist who had developed advanced algorithms for analyzing digital evidence, using machine learning to identify patterns that human investigators might miss. She'd made headlines 6 months earlier when her AI system had cracked a cold case by analyzing thousands of hours of security footage and identifying a suspect's unique walking pattern. Dr. Chen arrived at the precinct that afternoon, bringing with her an arsenal of cutting-edge technology. She was in her early 30s, brilliant and intense, with the rapid-fire speech of someone whose mind worked faster than her mouth could keep up. Maria briefed her on the case, emphasizing the digital angle and Victoria's extensive online presence. "What you're looking at," Dr. Chen explained as she set up her equipment, "is a generation that lives their entire life online. Every action is documented, every thought shared, every moment performed." But here's the thing people don't understand. You can't fake digital patterns. I can read the metadata, analyze the timing of posts, cross-reference locations, and detect anomalies that the human eye would never catch. If your suspect is hiding something, the algorithm will find it. Dr. Chen began her analysis by feeding Victoria's entire digital footprint into her custom AI system. 6 months of TikTok videos, thousands of Instagram posts, Twitter threads, YouTube vlogs, and even her Venmo transaction history. The AI would analyze everything: the geolocation data embedded in photos, the timestamps of uploads, the subtle changes in her posting patterns, even the microscopic variations in her facial expressions across different videos. "Give me 48 hours, Dr. Chen said. "If there's a ghost in the machine, we'll find it." While Dr. Chen's AI system worked through the digital mountain of Victoria's online life, Maria and Carlos pursued traditional investigative leads. They interviewed Isabella's friends, professors, and family members, building a comprehensive picture of the victim. Everyone described her the same way: kind, passionate, genuine. Not a single person believed she would take her own life. They also began digging into Victoria Vance's background. She had grown up in a wealthy Miami suburb, the daughter of a successful real estate developer and a former model. She'd attended an expensive private school, but had barely graduated, more interested in her social media presence than her studies. Her parents had bankrolled her influencer career, paying for the luxury apartment and expensive equipment. Tax records showed she was now making substantial income from sponsorships, but her spending vastly exceeded her earnings. She was living beyond even her considerable means. The security footage from the apartment building provided the first crack in Victoria's alibi. The building had cameras in the lobby, elevators, and parking garage. Maria and Carlos spent hours reviewing the grainy footage from the night of Isabella's death. At 11:47 p.m., Victoria was captured leaving her apartment and going up to Isabella's floor. She carried a small designer handbag. At 1:23 a.m., she was seen leaving Isabella's floor and returning to her own apartment. The bag looked heavier. When they brought this footage to Victoria's attention during a second interview at the station, her reaction was telling. She didn't deny being there. Instead, she had a ready explanation. Isabella had called her, upset and emotional, and Victoria had gone up to comfort her. They'd talked for a while, and Isabella had seemed better when Victoria left. The visit had been so unremarkable that Victoria had forgotten to mention it during the initial interview. "But here's the interesting thing," Maria said, leaning forward. "Isabella's phone records show no outgoing call to you that night. In fact, the last time she called you was 3 weeks ago, and you never answered." Victoria's perfectly made-up face remained calm, but Maria saw the flicker of calculation in her eyes. "She might have used her roommate's phone," Victoria suggested smoothly. But Isabella lived alone, and Victoria knew it. The interview ended with Victoria requesting her lawyer. Maria let her go, but the noose was tightening. They had her at the scene. They had her lying about the circumstances. What they didn't have yet was evidence of how Isabella had actually died. That evidence arrived the next morning in the form of Dr. Chen's preliminary report. The forensic AI specialist walked into Maria's office with a tablet in hand and an expression of grim satisfaction on her face. "Your instincts were right," Dr. Chen said without preamble. "Victoria Vance is a killer, and she's been planning this murder for at least 4 months. The AI found everything." Dr. Chen pulled up her tablet and began walking Maria through the findings. The AI had analyzed Victoria's search history, social media posts, and even the metadata from her videos. 4 months ago, Victoria's internet activity had undergone a dramatic shift. Between her usual fashion and beauty searches, new queries began appearing: how to make death look natural, undetectable poisons, smart home device recordings, and most damning, exotic plant toxins. Florida. But Victoria had been careful. She'd used incognito mode, VPNs, and deleted her browser history. She thought she'd covered her tracks. What she hadn't counted on was that her own AI-powered digital assistant had been logging every command, every search, and every question she'd asked it. Smart speakers, smartphones, AI assistants, Dr. Chen explained. They're always learning, always tracking your patterns. Victoria used voice commands to search for information about poisoning. She thought it was more private than typing. She was wrong. Every voice command is stored in the cloud, linked to her account, time-stamped, and geotagged. The AI had reconstructed a chilling timeline. Victoria had spent months researching rare botanical toxins, specifically something called monkshood or wolfsbane, a flowering plant that contained aconitine, one of the most toxic substances known to man. In small doses, it could cause respiratory failure that mimicked natural causes. It was nearly impossible to detect unless you knew to look for it, and even then, it required specialized testing that most medical examiners wouldn't think to order. But the AI had found more. By analyzing the visual data from Victoria's TikTok videos, the machine learning algorithm had detected something human eyes had missed. In a video posted 3 months earlier, there was a brief glimpse of Victoria's balcony garden in the background. Enhancing and analyzing the image, the AI had identified a flowering purple plant consistent with monkshood. Victoria had literally been growing her murder weapon in plain sight, confident that her millions of followers would only see the glamorous foreground, not the sinister background. There's more, Dr. Chen said, swiping to another screen. The AI analyzed her behavioral patterns through facial recognition across all her videos. In the weeks leading up to the murder, her micro-expressions showed elevated stress markers, dilated pupils in low-light situations, tension in her jaw muscles, forced rather than genuine smiles. She was planning something, and the stress was showing, even if she didn't realize it. Maria stared at the data in amazement. Traditional detective work would have taken months to piece together what the AI had found in 2 days. But Dr. Chen wasn't finished. Now for the smoking gun, she said. I had the AI analyze all videos posted by Victoria in the 48 hours before and after Isabella's death. Watch this. Dr. Chen played a TikTok video that Victoria had posted the morning after the murder. It was a typical morning routine video, showing Victoria waking up, making coffee, doing her skincare routine. But the AI had detected something in the background audio that the human ear couldn't distinguish. Dr. Chen isolated and amplified a specific frequency. There, beneath the cheerful music and Victoria's narration, was a sound, someone screaming. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but once Maria knew what to listen for, she could hear it. The scream lasted less than 2 seconds before being cut off, and the timestamp suggested it had been recorded at almost the exact time the ME had estimated Isabella's death. She recorded content while Isabella was dying, Maria said, her voice hollow with disgust. She couldn't resist creating content even during a murder. That's not all, Dr. Chen added. I ran the video through a specialized filter that detects digital manipulation. This video has been heavily edited. Victoria cut out approximately 14 minutes of footage from the middle of this morning routine. The algorithm can detect the edits in the audio waveforms and the slight inconsistencies in the lighting. She filmed this before the murder, edited out the actual crime, then added the ending afterward. She was creating her alibi in real time, building a digital trail that would show her as just a normal girl going about her day. Maria felt the familiar rush of a case breaking open. They had motive, opportunity, and now, thanks to artificial intelligence, they had evidence of premeditation and planning that would have been impossible to uncover through traditional means alone. Armed with Dr. Chen's findings, Detective Alvarez secured a warrant to search Victoria's apartment and seize all her electronic devices. The raid was scheduled for early morning, before Victoria could be alerted to the breakthrough in the investigation. A team of officers surrounded the luxury building as Maria, Carlos, and Dr. Chen approached Victoria's door. Victoria answered in her designer pajamas, her face puffy from sleep and without her usual makeup. For the first time, she looked her age, a scared young woman facing the consequences of her actions, but the fear lasted only a moment before her practiced confidence returned. Do you have any idea what time it is? She demanded. My lawyer is going to. We have a warrant, Maria interrupted, handing over the document. We'll be seizing all electronic devices, computers, phones, cameras, and storage devices. We're also executing a warrant to search your balcony and any plant materials found on the premises. Victoria's face went white. The mention of the balcony had struck home. She hadn't considered that her background decor could become evidence against her. The search team moved through the apartment with efficient precision. They documented everything: the elaborate filming setup, the extensive wardrobe of designer clothes, the scripts and storyboards for upcoming videos. On the balcony, a forensic botanist identified and carefully removed several plants, including one flowering specimen that was indeed monk's hood. The plant showed recent harvesting, with several stems cut close to the base. In Victoria's bedroom, hidden in a designer shoebox in the back of her closet, they found a small glass vial containing a dark liquid. Field testing confirmed it was a concentrated plant extract. The vial also contained residue that would later be confirmed as aconitine, the deadly toxin from monk's hood. Next to it was a small syringe and a pair of latex gloves. But perhaps most damning was what they found on Victoria's laptop. Despite her attempts to delete files, the forensic team recovered a document titled The Perfect Crime Content Plan. It was a detailed outline, written in Victoria's characteristic style, describing how to stage a murder to look like natural causes while simultaneously creating viral content from the tragedy. The document discussed optimal timing for tribute posts, projected engagement rates, and potential sponsorship opportunities that might arise from the sympathetic narrative of a grieving friend. The document contained a chilling line: authentic tragedy equals authentic engagement. My followers will never be more loyal than when they're comforting me through loss. Victoria was arrested on the spot, charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances of premeditation. As officers led her from her apartment in handcuffs, she seemed less concerned with the charges than with who might be filming. Even in her worst moment, her instinct was to consider the optics, the narrative, the content. At the station, Victoria initially refused to speak without her lawyer present. But Maria had one more card to play: the smart speaker recordings. Isabella had owned one of the devices, and just as Dr. Chen had predicted, it had been listening on the night of the murder. The manufacturer had complied with the subpoena, providing all audio files stored in association with Isabella's device. Most were routine: Isabella asking about the weather, requesting music, setting alarms. But there was one file from 12:43 a.m. on the night of her death that changed everything. In the interrogation room, Maria placed a laptop on the table in front of Victoria and her newly arrived lawyer. "We'd like you to listen to something," she said, pressing play. The audio quality was poor, filtered through the smart speaker's microphone, but the voices were unmistakable. Isabella's voice, thick with pain and fear. "Victoria, what did you put in my drink?" "I can't breathe. Please. Why are you doing this?" Then Victoria's voice, calm and collected. "Because you're in my way, Izzy. You're always in my way. This apartment, your perfect little life, your real friends who actually care about you. I'm done being the girl who tries too hard while you effortlessly have everything. Plus, your death is going to make the best content. My engagement rates will skyrocket. People love authentic trauma." There was a pause, filled only with Isabella's labored breathing and quiet sobs. Then Victoria's voice again. "Don't worry, it'll look natural. I've planned everything. And the best part? I'll get to play the grieving best friend. The sympathy follows will be insane." The recording ended with a soft thud, likely Isabella collapsing. The smart speaker, triggered by the words "perfect" and "play," had captured the confession and stored it in the cloud, waiting to be discovered. The color drained from Victoria's face as the recording played. Her lawyer's head dropped into his hands. There was no talking their way out of this. The artificial intelligence she'd used to build her empire had become the witness that would seal her fate. With the smoking gun evidence, Victoria's carefully constructed world began to crumble. In the days following her arrest, investigators discovered the full extent of her planning and the dark psychology behind the murder. Dr. Chen's AI continued to analyze Victoria's digital history, revealing a disturbing pattern. The machine learning algorithm identified that Victoria had created multiple fake social media accounts over the past year, using them to harass Isabella anonymously. The accounts left cruel comments on Isabella's modest Instagram posts, mocking her appearance, her career ambitions, and her simple lifestyle. The AI traced the accounts back to Victoria through behavioral patterns in the writing style, posting times that matched Victoria's known schedule, and IP addresses that linked to her apartment building. The investigation also uncovered Victoria's financial motive. She was drowning in debt despite her influencer income. Luxury purchases, expensive trips for content, and the constant pressure to maintain her image had left her nearly bankrupt. But Isabella had received a substantial grant for her marine biology research, money that Isabella had mentioned excitedly in her last conversations with Victoria. In Victoria's twisted mind, Isabella's success was a personal insult, a reminder that genuine passion and hard work were being rewarded while Victoria's manufactured persona required constant, exhausting maintenance. Detective Rodriguez discovered that Victoria had taken out a life insurance policy on Isabella 6 months earlier, exploiting their friendship to convince Isabella it was a responsible adult thing to do. The policy named Victoria as the secondary beneficiary after Isabella's mother. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from Victoria's private journal, found in an encrypted file on her laptop. The entries read like a manifesto of narcissism and rage. Victoria wrote extensively about her jealousy of Isabella's effortless authenticity, her contempt for people who didn't understand the work of being influential, and her conviction that she deserved success more than people who just got lucky by being genuinely nice. One entry, dated a month before the murder, read, "Isabella doesn't even appreciate what she has. She could be leveraging her marine biology thing for content, partnering with eco-brands, building a platform. Instead, she actually cares about the stupid turtles. What a waste. If I had her life, her opportunities, I could turn it into an empire. She doesn't deserve any of it." The AI analysis revealed something else troubling. Victoria had been documenting her crime in real time through private video diaries that she'd intended to release years later as a tell-all documentary. She had filmed herself preparing the poison, practicing her grief reactions in the mirror, and even recorded herself entering Isabella's apartment on the night of the murder with a small hidden camera. She'd envisioned turning her confession into content, the ultimate transgressive reveal that would cement her as the most notorious influencer of her generation. She thought she could monetize her own murder confession, Dr. Chen explained to the investigative team. In her mind, this wasn't just about killing Isabella. It was about creating the ultimate true crime story, with herself as the central character. She was planning to release it all eventually, probably with a book deal and documentary series. The AI found rough drafts of promotional materials in her files. As news of Victoria's arrest spread, her social media empire collapsed overnight. Sponsors dropped her, her accounts were suspended, and the millions of followers who had once adored Venus Violet turned against her with the swift brutality of mob justice. Her comment sections, once filled with heart emojis and praise, now overflowed with condemnation and disgust. Meanwhile, Isabella's story began to emerge in the media, not as a footnote to Victoria's crimes, but as a celebration of her life. Her professors at the University of Miami spoke of her groundbreaking research on coral reef restoration. Her friends shared stories of her kindness and environmental activism. A scholarship was established in her name for marine biology students. Isabella Martinez, who had lived authentically and loved genuinely, would be remembered long after Victoria Vance became just another cautionary tale about the dangers of vanity and online obsession. The prosecution's case against Victoria Vance was airtight, built on a foundation of traditional detective work enhanced by cutting-edge artificial intelligence. The Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office announced they would seek the maximum penalty: life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the weeks before her formal arraignment, Victoria made several attempts to control the narrative from jail. She tried to give exclusive interviews to entertainment news outlets, positioning herself as a victim of social media pressure and mental health struggles. She attempted to gain sympathy by claiming she'd been coerced or manipulated, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary. She even tried to fire her lawyer and represent herself, believing she could charm a jury the way she'd charmed her followers. But the evidence was overwhelming. Detective Maria Alvarez worked with prosecutors to build a timeline that was virtually unassailable. The case file included the smart speaker recording of Victoria's confession, the monk's hood plant from her balcony, matched to residue found in Isabella's system, the edited TikTok video with Isabella's scream in the background, the perfect crime content plan. Document financial records showing motive, Victoria's private video diaries documenting her planning, behavioral analysis from Dr. Chen's AI showing calculated deception, text messages showing the deterioration of their friendship. The fake social media accounts used to harass Isabella's security footage, placing Victoria at the scene. Dr. Chen's artificial intelligence had done more than just solve the case. It had revolutionized the investigation. Her system had analyzed over 50,000 pieces of digital evidence in a fraction of the time it would have taken human investigators. The AI had identified patterns, connections, and anomalies that might never have been discovered through traditional methods. This case represents a new era in criminal investigation, Dr. Chen told the assembled detectives at a department briefing. The criminals are using technology to plan, execute, and cover up their crimes. We have to use the same technology to bring them to justice. The algorithm doesn't get tired, doesn't miss details, and doesn't have biases. It just follows the data wherever it leads. But Dr. Chen was also careful to emphasize the human element. The AI is a tool, nothing more. It can analyze and identify, but it takes human intuition to know what questions to ask, what to look for, what matters. Detective Alvarez's instinct that something was wrong, Detective Rodriguez's systematic approach, the medical examiner's thoroughness, those are what broke this case. The AI just helped us see what was already there. On a humid Miami morning, 3 months after Isabella's death, Victoria Vance stood before a judge for her arraignment. Gone was the confident influencer, the carefully curated Venus Violet persona. She wore an orange jail jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup. For the first time in years, she looked like a real person rather than a brand. The charges were read: first-degree murder with special circumstances of premeditation and use of poison, additional charges of fraud, evidence tampering, and identity theft related to the fake social media accounts. The evidence was presented in summary: the digital forensics, the smart speaker recording, the physical evidence of the poison. Victoria's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, a formality given the mountain of evidence. But even he knew the case was lost. Several major law firms had refused to take Victoria as a client, unwilling to be associated with such a cold-blooded and calculated crime. The attorney who finally agreed to represent her did so only because the court appointed him. As Victoria was led from the courtroom, Detective Maria Alvarez watched from the gallery. She thought of Isabella Martinez, the bright young woman who had died because someone else's vanity and greed had spiraled into murderous rage. She thought of all the people Isabella would never save, all the coral reefs she would never restore, all the life she would never live. But she also thought of how technology, the same tool Victoria had used to build her false empire, had become the instrument of justice. The smart speaker that heard the confession, the AI that analyzed the patterns, the metadata that couldn't lie. In trying to create the perfect crime, Victoria had left a digital trail that was impossible to erase. She forgot the most important thing, Dr. Chen said, standing beside Maria in the hallway outside the courtroom. In the digital age, nothing is ever really deleted. Every action leaves a trace. Every lie creates an inconsistency. Every carefully curated image hides 1,000 data points that tell the truth. The algorithm always knows. 6 months later, Victoria Vance accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During her sentencing hearing, she showed no remorse, instead complaining about the quality of legal representation and the unfairness of using AI evidence against her. The judge, a stern woman who had presided over countless murder trials, had harsh words for the defendant. "You saw human life as nothing more than content to be consumed," she said. "You valued social media engagement over your friend's existence. You planned and executed a murder with the same cold calculation you used to plan your posts and videos. The irony is that the same technology you exploited to build your false image became the witness that exposed your true nature. You wanted to be famous, Miss Vance. You wanted to be remembered. Well, you will be, as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mistaking attention for meaning and followers for friends." Isabella's mother attended the sentencing. In her victim impact statement, she spoke not of Victoria, but of her daughter. "My Isabella was real," she said through tears. "Everything about her was genuine. She loved the ocean. She loved learning. She loved helping others. She didn't need an audience to validate her worth. She knew her worth came from how she treated people, how she contributed to the world. That's the lesson I hope people take from this tragedy. Not that you can't trust influencers or technology, but that authenticity matters. Being real matters. And no amount of likes or followers can replace genuine human connection and compassion." The case had far-reaching implications beyond Miami. Dr. Chen's AI system was adopted by police departments across the country, creating a new standard for digital forensics. Tech companies updated their privacy policies and data retention practices, acknowledging that their devices could serve as witnesses to crimes. Legal scholars debated the implications of AI-analyzed evidence, with some raising concerns about digital privacy, while others argued that criminals had no expectation of privacy while committing crimes. Detective Maria Alvarez was promoted to lead the department's new digital crimes unit, with Dr. Chen as the permanent forensic consultant. Together, they worked on cases that existed in the intersection of technology and traditional crime, using artificial intelligence to uncover truths that might otherwise remain hidden. The University of Miami dedicated a coral reef restoration research facility in Isabella's name. Every year, marine biology students competed for the Isabella Martinez Memorial Scholarship, awarded to students who demonstrated both academic excellence and a genuine commitment to environmental conservation. Her legacy lived on, not in social media posts or viral videos, but in real-world impact, in students inspired by her passion, in reefs restored through methods she had helped develop. As for Victoria Vance, her social media accounts remained frozen as evidence, a digital ghost town where her last posts about her beautiful bestie stood as a monument to her deception. The millions of followers had long since moved on, their attention claimed by the next trend, the next star, the next performance. Venus Violet had achieved the fame she'd so desperately craved, but not in the way she'd imagined. She was famous as a killer, a narcissist, a cautionary tale. Her name became shorthand for the dangers of social media obsession and the hollow pursuit of online validation. In prison, Victoria was denied access to social media, phones, and the internet. For someone whose entire identity had been built on digital interaction and constant content creation, it was perhaps the cruelest punishment imaginable. She was forced to exist in silence, without an audience, without validation, without the carefully filtered lens that had defined her life. She was forced, for the first time, to simply be herself, and she discovered she had no idea who that was. The case closed, but its echo continued. The algorithm of evil, as the media dubbed it, became a landmark case in forensic science, studied in law schools and police academies. It represented a turning point, a moment when law enforcement fully embraced the power of artificial intelligence to solve crimes that would have been impossible to crack just a generation earlier. And in the warm waters off Miami Beach, where Isabella Martinez had spent so many happy hours studying the marine life she loved, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm. The coral reefs she had worked to save grew slowly, patiently, naturally, without performance, without pretense, without an audience. Just life, doing what life does best. Persisting, adapting, and enduring long after the temporary noise of human vanity has faded into silence. Detective Maria Alvarez sometimes visited the research facility bearing Isabella's name. She would stand at the edge of the dock, watching students dive into the clear water to study the reefs below, and she would think about the case that had changed everything. The case where artificial intelligence had been the key to unlocking a murder, where algorithms had succeeded, where traditional investigation might have failed, where technology had both enabled a crime and solved it. But mostly, she thought about Isabella, a young woman who had lived authentically in an age of filters, who had chosen substance over performance, who had been murdered by someone who couldn't understand that real value comes not from being watched, but from how you choose to see others. In the end, that was the lesson of the algorithm of evil, that all the technology in the world, all the artificial intelligence and digital forensics and smart devices were just tools. AI is going to end human civilization. Mark my words.